"Make it quick, cowboy." "I won't scream," said the wounded Apache girl who was stuck under the canyon. The year was 1874, in the wide and restless land known as Arizona Territory. The desert there did not forgive easily. The sun ruled the sky with sharp light, and the wind moved through the canyons like a quiet watcher. Red rocks stood tall and proud, shaped by time, heat, and endless storms. During the day, the ground felt like fire under bare hands. At night, the cold slipped in without warning. It was a land that tested every living thing. That afternoon, the canyon seemed still, almost peaceful, but only hours earlier, the silence had been broken. A small group of settlers had crossed paths with an Apache family traveling through the rocky trails. Fear moved faster than words. No one had truly wanted trouble, but old stories and mistrust lived deep in people's hearts. Voices had been raised. Horses had panicked. In the confusion, people scattered in different directions. When the dust finally settled, the canyon swallowed the noise as if nothing had happened. At the bottom of a narrow slope, partly hidden by fallen stones and dry brush, lay a young Apache girl named Apache. She was 16 years old, with long dark hair now covered in dust and sweat. Her breathing was uneven, and her leg was pinned beneath a heavy rock that had rolled down during the chaos. When her horse lost balance on the steep edge, she had fallen hard. The horse had escaped, but she had not. At first, she had tried to push the rock away with both hands. She had pulled and twisted, using all the strength she had. But the stone was too heavy, and pain shot through her leg each time she moved. After several tries, her body began to shake from exhaustion. She pressed her teeth together and forced herself to stop struggling. Wasting strength would only make things worse. The canyon above her looked like a narrow slice of blue sky between tall red walls. The sun stared down without mercy. Heat wrapped around her like a blanket she could not remove. Her throat was dry. Her small water pouch had fallen somewhere during the fall, and she could not see it anywhere near her. She listened carefully. In the desert, listening could mean survival. She heard the faint whistle of wind sliding through cracks in the rocks. She heard a distant bird cry once and then disappear into silence. No voices, no footsteps, no sign of her family. For a moment, fear tried to take control of her heart. Her family would think she had escaped ahead of them. They would not return to the canyon quickly, not while danger still lingered nearby. She knew this. They would have to protect the younger children first. They would believe she was safe. Apache closed her eyes and remembered her father's voice. He had always spoken calmly, even during hard times. "The land listens," he used to say. "If you panic, it grows louder. If you stay calm, it shows you a path." She focused on breathing slowly. Inhale, exhale. Even though pain burned in her leg, she tried to keep her mind steady. She would not cry out unless she truly heard someone close. Screaming into empty space would only steal the little strength she had left. Time passed slowly. The sun moved inch by inch across the sky. Sweat dried on her skin, leaving a thin layer of dust. Flies buzzed near her face, drawn by the smell of sweat and the warmth of her body. She brushed them away weakly. Her thoughts drifted to her mother, who had braided her hair that very morning. Her mother had smiled and told her she was becoming strong and wise. Apache had laughed then, feeling grown and proud. Now she wondered if she would see that smile again. She did not allow tears to fall. Tears would dry too quickly in this heat, and she needed every drop of water inside her body. Above the canyon, far beyond her sight, a lone rider moved along a ridge trail. His name was Thomas Reed. He was a cowboy in his early 20s, with sun-browned skin and tired but steady eyes. He had been searching for 2 stray cattle that had wandered away from his employer's ranch. He did not expect to find anything unusual that day, just another long ride under a hot sky. As he guided his horse carefully along the rocky path, he noticed something that made him pause. A horse without a rider grazed nervously near a patch of brush. Its saddle was still strapped on, but the reins dragged loosely against the ground. That was never a good sign. Thomas narrowed his eyes and scanned the area. The ground showed marks of struggle, hoofprints circling in panic, disturbed dust, and sliding rocks near the edge of a slope. He dismounted slowly, tying his horse to a sturdy bush. He was not a careless man. In those lands, danger could hide behind any rock. He removed his hat and listened. The wind carried no voices, only the soft hum of heat rising from stone. Carefully, step by step, he moved toward the edge where rocks had shifted. Looking down, he saw a steep drop into a narrow canyon. The slope was difficult but not impossible to climb. He hesitated for a moment, weighing his options. The stray cattle could wait, but a loose horse meant someone might be hurt. He began climbing down. Loose gravel slid under his boots. He used his hands to steady himself against warm rock. As he descended, he thought about the stories he had grown up hearing. Stories about Apache raids, stories about settlers disappearing. In his childhood town, people spoke of the Apache with fear and anger. Those stories had shaped him, even if he had never personally faced such conflict. When he reached the canyon floor, he paused again. At first, he saw nothing but stone and shadow. Then he heard a faint movement, a small shift of gravel. He turned sharply. There, partly hidden behind a cluster of fallen rocks, was a girl. She looked smaller than he expected, younger. Her clothes were torn from the fall and her leg was trapped beneath a heavy stone. Dust streaked her face, but her eyes were clear and sharp, watching him carefully. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Thomas felt a strange tightness in his chest. He had expected many things, but not this. Not a wounded girl alone in the canyon. Apache saw the cowboy hat, the boots, the shape of a man she had been taught to fear. She knew what settlers sometimes did when they found her people alone. She had heard enough stories of her own. Pain and heat had already weakened her, but she forced her voice to stay steady. "Make it quick, cowboy," she said, her words dry but firm. "I won't scream." The sentence surprised him so much that he almost stepped back. In her voice there was no begging, no shaking, only tired courage. For a second, Thomas did not know how to answer. He looked at her trapped leg, then at her face. She truly believed he had come to end her suffering. That thought struck him harder than he expected. He raised both hands slowly to show he held no weapon. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quietly. The canyon held its breath. Apache studied his expression. She searched for signs of cruelty, signs of anger. Instead, she saw uncertainty, confusion, and something else she did not expect, concern. Pain pulsed through her leg again, reminding her that time was not on her side. The sun had begun its slow path downward, but the heat still pressed heavily against them both. If she stayed trapped much longer, night would bring cold, and she would not survive the change in temperature. Thomas stepped closer, carefully, giving her space to react. He knelt beside the rock and tested its weight with both hands. It did not move easily. He glanced at her again. "How long have you been here?" he asked. She swallowed before answering. "Since the sun was high." That meant hours. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Leaving her, there was not something he could do. Whatever stories he had heard about her people did not match the reality in front of him, a wounded girl alone under a burning sky. Apache watched him closely. She still did not fully trust him. Trust was not simple in a land divided by fear, but she also understood that he was her only chance. Above them, the sky slowly shifted from bright white blue to softer gold. Shadows began stretching along the canyon walls. The desert waited to see what choice the cowboy would make. And in that quiet, heavy moment, something larger than fear stood between them, a small, fragile space where humanity could grow, even in the harshest land. The girl under the canyon held her breath. The cowboy looked at the stone. The sun continued its slow descent, and the story truly began there, not with anger or conflict, but with a choice. Thomas looked at the young Apache girl trapped under the stone. Her dark eyes met his, steady and unyielding, even though her body was exhausted and in pain. She did not move unnecessarily, keeping her energy to survive. Her breathing came in short, shallow bursts, and each time she shifted, her leg protested with a sharp pang of agony. Thomas knew immediately that time was critical. He had to act, but every step had to be careful. One wrong move and she could be seriously hurt, or worse. He lowered himself slowly, making sure not to scare her further. The rock that pinned her leg was heavy, and Thomas realized that he would need both strength and cleverness to shift it safely. He scanned the canyon floor for anything that could help. A sturdy branch, a piece of broken wood, a large stone to use as leverage. The desert did not offer much, only sand, smaller rocks, and dry bushes, but there was always something if you looked carefully. After a few moments, he spotted a thick branch lying nearby. It was just strong enough to use as a lever. "Hold still," Thomas said gently. His voice was calm, steady, and meant to reassure her. Apache nodded slightly, trusting him just enough to remain quiet. She did not speak. Speaking took too much energy, and she needed every ounce of strength to stay alert. Her eyes never left his hands as he positioned the branch against the heavy rock. Sweat ran down her temple, stinging her eyes, but she blinked through it, focusing on the man who might save her life. Thomas applied pressure carefully. The rock did not budge at first. He shifted his weight, braced his feet on smaller stones, and tried again. Slowly, very slowly, the rock inched forward. Each tiny movement caused a wave of fear to run through Apache. She gritted her teeth and pressed her palms to the canyon floor to stop herself from screaming. "You're very brave," Thomas said, noticing her effort to stay silent. He knew that bravery in such situations was not about fighting or running. It was about control, patience, and the will to survive. Apache's mind drifted for a moment, remembering her mother's words. "Strong winds cannot bend a tree that roots deep," her mother had said. Now trapped under the rock, she understood the meaning. She had to remain rooted. She had to stay still, focused, and trust that someone would come to her aid. Minutes passed. Thomas adjusted the branch, using the leverage to lift one edge of the rock slightly. Dust fell away in tiny clouds. The sun shone harshly above them, making the shadows dance along the canyon walls. Sweat trickled down Thomas's back and dripped from the tip of his nose, but he kept working. He did not flinch, did not make sudden movements, and spoke in soft tones, giving Apache a sense of calm. Finally, the rock shifted enough for her leg to slide free. Relief washed over both of them, but neither moved too quickly. Thomas let go of the branch and gently reached for her leg, examining it. There were no broken bones, thankfully, but the flesh was bruised and scratched, and the skin was raw from the friction of the rock. He tore a piece of his shirt into a long strip, dampened it slightly with water from his canteen, and wrapped it around her leg. His hands were steady but gentle, careful not to tighten it too much. "This will protect it for now," he said. "You'll be all right." Apache exhaled softly. She had been in pain for hours, but the relief of having the rock removed was immense. She looked at Thomas for the first time with a small flicker of gratitude. She did not speak yet. Words seemed heavy and unnecessary. Her trust had to grow slowly, and she would test him with every glance and movement. Thomas glanced around the canyon floor. The sun had moved lower now, and shadows stretched long and thin along the rocks. He realized that night would not be far, and with it, the temperature would drop quickly. The desert was merciless once the sun disappeared. He knew he had to make a decision. He could not leave her alone here, but leading her to the nearest town was risky. The Apache warriors might misunderstand his intentions, and some settlers might not welcome her presence. Yet leaving her here was not an option. He extended his hand gently. "Can you stand?" he asked. Apache studied him. She could feel the weariness in his body, the sincerity in his voice. Slowly, she nodded. With his help, she managed to get up. Her injured leg supported her partially, but each step was careful, deliberate, and slow. Thomas stayed close, offering her the support she needed, guiding her through the uneven stones and sandy floor. As they moved, Apache thought about her family. They would be searching for her, worried and scared. She wished she could call out, but she stayed quiet. Her mind raced with thoughts of what might happen when they found her. Would they be angry at the man helping her, or would they understand that he had saved her life? She did not know. In the desert, questions often had to wait. Survival came first. Thomas noticed her hesitation and spoke again. "You are safe with me," he said softly. "We'll take it one step at a time." Her eyes met his, and for a moment she saw the truth in his words. It was rare in these times to find someone who acted without fear, anger, or prejudice. She had expected cruelty, but here was a man who had chosen to help instead. That realization brought her a small comfort. The canyon walls around them seemed to narrow, enclosing them in a quiet space where nothing else existed but the two of them. Each step was deliberate. Each movement careful. The desert wind whispered softly, carrying small particles of dust that brushed against their skin. It was a reminder of the harshness of the land, but also of the fragile beauty that existed even in difficult moments. Hours passed as they slowly moved toward a slightly safer path leading out of the canyon. The sun dipped lower, painting the rocks in shades of gold and red. Thomas helped Apache over every difficult stone and guided her around sharp edges. He knew that rushing could result in injury, and slowing down was the safest choice. As the shadows grew longer, Apache finally spoke, her voice soft and tentative. "Why are you helping me?" Thomas paused. He had expected this question eventually. His mind raced briefly through the stories he had grown up with, stories that painted the Apache as enemies, stories that told him to fear them. Yet, standing here, seeing her bravery, her trust, and her quiet strength, he realized that those stories were just words. They did not represent the truth of the people before him. "Because you are human," he replied simply. "Because you are in pain and alone, and because someone has to do what's right, even if it's not easy." Her eyes studied him carefully. Words like that were rare in her experience. Actions were more common, actions of fear, hate, or survival. But here was a man whose words matched his actions. Slowly, she began to let her guard down just slightly. The journey was not easy. Each step brought new challenges, loose gravel, steep inclines, and the constant reminder of the injured leg. A pony stumbled once and Thomas caught her just in time. "Careful," he said. "We'll get there, you can do this." She nodded, drawing on her inner strength. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. Together they moved through the canyon as the sun finally touched the horizon. Night was approaching. The desert was cooling, but Thomas knew that exposure could be dangerous. He found a small alcove near the canyon wall, a place where the wind was lighter and the rocks offered some warmth and protection. He helped a pony sit, using his own coat to cover her shoulders. They shared a small amount of water, enough to ease their thirst for now. Sitting there, they exchanged few words. The silence was not empty, it was a space of trust and observation. A pony looked at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. She felt a strange mix of fear and hope. Fear of the unknown night, hope that she would survive and see her family again. Thomas observed her quietly. He had saved lives before, but never had it felt this personal. He realized that in helping her, he was not just moving a rock or tending a wound. He was bridging a gap between fear and understanding, between stories told by others and the reality of what people could truly be. As the night deepened, Thomas prepared a small fire, careful not to attract attention but enough to provide warmth. A pony watched the flames, feeling a small sense of comfort she had not felt all day. For the first time since she had been trapped, she felt safe. They rested there, two strangers brought together by chance, fear and courage. In the quiet desert, trust began to grow, slow and careful. The canyon walls loomed high above, but in that small space, humanity shone brighter than any rock or shadow. A pony whispered softly into the darkness, "Thank you," though her voice was barely audible. It was the first real words of trust she had spoken to another human that day. Thomas nodded in reply, understanding the weight of those two simple words. The desert night continued around them. Somewhere far above, the moon rose slowly, casting silvery light on the red rocks. The wind carried faint whispers, as if acknowledging the courage and choice made by both the cowboy and the Apache girl. It was a night that would mark the beginning of something neither of them could fully understand yet. A story of bravery, trust, and compassion in a land where such moments were rare. And so, under the quiet stars and the watchful desert, the first step of their journey together ended. Not with a battle, not with anger, but with the careful, deliberate choice to help, to trust, and to survive. The desert night had grown quiet, except for the soft rustle of wind moving over the red rocks and the distant call of a nocturnal bird. Thomas and a pony rested in a small alcove near the canyon wall, the faint warmth of the fire curling around them. A pony's leg was bandaged, but the pain still pulsed with each heartbeat. She had learned long ago that the desert demanded patience and endurance, and now, with Thomas at her side, she felt the weight of her exhaustion more than ever. As the fire crackled softly, Thomas studied the surrounding canyon. The path they had come down was too treacherous to return, and the night offered both protection and danger. He knew that staying in the canyon overnight was risky, yet moving too far in the dark could worsen a pony's injury. The balance between caution and urgency weighed heavily on him. Every decision mattered. "We should move when the moon is higher," Thomas whispered, not wanting to startle her. "It will give us light without drawing too much attention." A pony nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. She wanted to speak, to ask questions about him, about the world outside her Apache life, but her voice felt too fragile. Instead, she let silence fill the space, allowing her body to rest while her mind replayed the events of the day. Her thoughts wandered to her family. Were they searching for her now? Did they think she had been taken, or worse? Fear gnawed at her stomach, but she pushed it away. Survival depended on calm, and panic was a luxury she could not afford. She studied Thomas, noticing small details, the way his hands moved, the careful attention he paid to every sound, the steady rhythm of his breathing. There was honesty in his actions, something she could trust. Hours passed slowly, and the moon rose higher, casting a silver glow across the canyon. Thomas helped a pony to her feet, supporting her as she took tentative steps. The sand beneath them shifted with each movement, and the rocky terrain demanded constant attention. They moved slowly, each step calculated to avoid further injury. The desert stretched endlessly around them, quiet and still, but Thomas knew that danger was never far. Predators, wild animals, and the unexpected presence of other humans could all bring trouble. Yet he also knew that staying still would be just as dangerous. They needed to reach a safer path, preferably one that would lead to signs of a pony's people, the Apache. They walked in near silence, only the crunch of sand and small rocks breaking the stillness. Occasionally, Thomas glanced at the horizon, looking for landmarks he remembered from earlier rides through the territory. The desert was vast, but experience had taught him to read its subtle signs: the curve of a ridge, the shape of a distant mesa, the faint traces of a trail used by people or animals. A pony's breathing remained shallow, her energy low, but she followed his lead, trusting him to guide them. Despite the fear in her mind, a small flicker of hope began to grow. She had expected cruelty, mistrust, or harm, but Thomas offered only careful attention and protection. It was a strange feeling, to be saved by someone from the very world she had been taught to fear. By dawn, the sky had shifted to soft shades of orange and pink. The canyon walls glowed with the first light of day, revealing hidden details of the rocks and sand. Thomas paused to let a pony rest. He removed the blanket they had used overnight and helped her sit on a flatter section of rock. She drank sparingly from the water he carried, careful not to take too much at once. Hydration was vital, but so was conserving the limited supply they had. As she rested, a pony finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but firm, carrying the weight of curiosity and caution. "Why are you helping me?" Thomas looked at her, his face illuminated by the rising sun. He thought carefully before answering. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "Because no one deserves to be left alone and hurt, and because sometimes doing what is right is more important than anything else." A pony listened closely, weighing his words. Trust had been a hard-earned skill in her life, learned from both her family and her people. It was not given lightly, yet the sincerity in Thomas's voice and the careful actions he had taken to free her leg made her believe him. She allowed herself a small measure of faith. They continued their journey, moving slowly through the desert terrain. The path became more forgiving as they neared a ridge that Thomas recognized from his previous rides. From there they could see traces of an old Apache trail, a series of flattened stones and the faint marks of animal hooves. The sight brought a spark of relief to a pony's heart. Perhaps her family would find her soon. Perhaps she was no longer alone in the harsh desert. But the journey was not without challenge. Loose stones caused slips, and the uneven ground tested a pony's injured leg. Thomas supported her, lifting her gently over obstacles and keeping a steady pace. The sun climbed higher, bringing with it the familiar desert heat, but they pressed on, driven by necessity and the fragile hope of reunion. As they approached the trail, Thomas gestured for a pony to stop. From their vantage point, they could see signs of recent human activity, smoke rising faintly in the distance and the glint of a small campfire. He knew these were likely Apache scouts or family members searching for her. Relief mingled with tension. They were close, but the final steps required care. Thomas helped a pony to sit once more behind a large boulder, giving her time to rest and gather strength. They observed the distant figures carefully, ensuring that their approach would not alarm or provoke any misunderstanding. The Apache had reasons to be cautious. Strangers, even well-intentioned ones, were not always welcome. After a brief pause, Thomas motioned for a pony to stand. "We'll move slowly," he whispered. "I'll stay behind you so you can guide the way. Stay calm and everything will be fine." She nodded, gripping his hand briefly for reassurance. Together they moved toward the trail, each step deliberate and quiet. The figures ahead became clearer, men and women all on alert, scanning the surrounding terrain for signs of danger. When they finally drew close, Thomas stopped a short distance away. He wanted a pony to take the lead. She stepped forward cautiously, calling out softly in her native language. The figures froze, then slowly turned toward her voice. Recognition came in their eyes and relief replaced the tension. Her family approached quickly, checking her injuries and offering comfort. They had feared the worst, but here she was, alive and supported. Aponi's mother knelt beside her, tears streaming down her face. Her father's eyes were wide with a mixture of anger, relief, and gratitude. Thomas remained at a respectful distance. He had done his part, and now it was time for her family to take over. Yet he could not leave without acknowledging the bond that had formed during their shared struggle. Aponi turned to him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. You saved me," she said softly. Thomas nodded. "I did, but now you are with your family, that is what matters." Her family looked at him with cautious eyes, unsure of his intentions but willing to trust the truth they saw. Aponi's father stepped forward, examining the bandage on her leg and the care in Thomas's actions. He understood that this man had risked much to help his daughter. Aponi's mother placed her hand gently on Thomas's arm. "Thank you," she said simply. "You have shown honor today." Thomas nodded again, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The desert was harsh, the world often cruel, but in this moment, a simple act of kindness had made a difference. Before leaving, Thomas handed Aponi a small piece of cloth from his coat. "Keep this for courage," he said. "It will remind you that even in hard times, someone believed in doing what was right." She accepted it with trembling hands, holding it close. It was more than cloth. It was a symbol of trust, courage, and the fragile bond formed between two strangers in the heart of the desert. As Thomas turned to leave, Aponi watched him go. She did not call out. Words were not needed. The act itself had spoken louder than anything could. In the quiet desert, a story of bravery and compassion had unfolded, leaving an impression that would last far beyond the canyon walls. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the red rocks and the path they had traveled. The wind carried the soft whispers of the desert, as if acknowledging the courage of both the girl and the cowboy. Aponi's family gathered around her, offering warmth and protection, while Thomas disappeared along the ridge, a silent witness to the power of human kindness. The journey through the desert had tested every skill, every ounce of patience and strength, but it had also shown the importance of compassion. In a land where fear and mistrust often ruled, a simple choice, to help rather than harm, had changed the course of a young girl's life. Aponi stood with her family, looking toward the horizon. She felt stronger now, not just in body but in spirit. The desert had challenged her, but it had also shown her that bravery could be quiet, that trust could be earned, and that even in the harshest places, humanity could shine. And as the canyon faded behind her, she carried the memory of the cowboy who had chosen to lift a stone instead of turning away, a memory that would remain with her forever. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the rocks in soft shades of orange and gold. Aponi sat beside her mother, her injured leg carefully wrapped, her small hands brushing dust from her clothes. Her father had been quietly observing the horizon, scanning the ridges where Thomas had disappeared. She felt a mix of relief, gratitude, and curiosity all at once. The night in the canyon and the journey through the desert had tested her body and spirit, but it had also shown her the unexpected kindness of a stranger. Her family spoke quietly among themselves. They discussed the events of the previous day, piecing together what must have happened when they had been forced to retreat from the sudden conflict with the settlers. Every now and then, their eyes flicked to Aponi, ensuring she was safe, that her breathing was steady, that she had truly survived the ordeal. She looked at them and nodded, the small movements of her shoulders expressing more than words ever could. Aponi's mind wandered briefly to Thomas. He had vanished into the desert before she could even thank him properly. But she understood that he had acted out of duty and kindness, not expectation of reward. In the harsh land they lived in, kindness was a rare gift, and she would carry the memory of his actions with her forever. Her father finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "She is safe. That is what matters. Whoever helped her deserves respect, even if he is a stranger." Aponi's mother nodded, gently pressing her hand to Aponi's shoulder. There was a shared understanding among them. Survival often depended on trust, on recognizing the humanity in others, even when fear told them to do otherwise. After breakfast, they began preparing for the journey back to their camp. The desert was unforgiving, and staying in one place too long was never safe. They moved slowly, careful of Aponi's injured leg, and the desert seemed to welcome their cautious steps with a quiet serenity. The sun climbed higher, warming the rocks and sand, reminding them that life in the desert demanded vigilance and endurance. As they walked, Apache spoke softly to her mother, describing the cowboy who had saved her. "He didn't look like anyone I expected," she said. "He was calm, careful, and he didn't judge me. He just helped." Her mother listened, a faint smile on her lips, understanding that the girl's words carried weight. In a world filled with mistrust, these moments of shared humanity were precious. Days passed as they made their way back to the larger Apache camp. Each day brought small victories, finding water, avoiding dangerous areas, and learning to trust the land again. Apache's leg healed gradually, the bandage keeping her mobility intact while her body regained strength. She walked a little farther each day, feeling the desert beneath her feet, learning again how to read the wind, the sand, and the rocks. Evenings were spent sitting around small fires, listening to the elders share stories of survival, bravery, and wisdom. Apache found herself absorbing every word, her experience with Thomas fresh in her mind. She realized that courage was not always shown in battle or loud acts. It could be quiet, patient, and steady, like the careful lifting of a rock to free someone trapped. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she found a small piece of cloth tucked in her satchel. She recognized it immediately. It was the scrap of Thomas's coat he had given her. She held it close, feeling the texture, remembering the weight of his hands, the calm in his voice, and the steady rhythm of his breathing as he had guided her through the desert. The cloth became more than a simple piece of fabric. It was a symbol of trust, courage, and hope. Her father noticed her quiet attention and asked, "What is that?" She explained simply, "A gift from someone who helped me when I had no one else." He didn't need to, but he did. Her father nodded solemnly, a sense of respect in his eyes. "Then we honor him even if we never see him again." Weeks passed, and the story of Apache's survival began to spread within the camp. Elders and children alike spoke of her bravery and patience, of her strength under the rock, and of the stranger who had appeared in the canyon to help her. Each retelling highlighted the courage it took to trust, even in a world filled with fear and uncertainty. One day, as Apache walked near the edge of the camp, she noticed a small figure in the distance, a man riding slowly along the ridge. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be him? She ran toward the camp elders, pointing to the figure, and together they watched. The man moved with purpose but also caution, as if aware of the delicate balance of the land and the people he approached. Thomas dismounted carefully when he reached the camp, nodding respectfully to the elders. Apache's father stepped forward first, assessing his intentions. Thomas lowered his eyes slightly, showing humility and respect. Then, in a moment of quiet understanding, Apache ran to him, her movements careful but determined. "I remember you," she said softly, holding the scrap of cloth. "You helped me. You saved me." Thomas smiled faintly, acknowledging her words without pride. "I only did what anyone should do," he replied. "No one should be left behind." Her family gathered around, offering their own thanks, and for a moment the desert seemed to pause. There was no tension, no fear, only recognition of bravery, humanity, and the quiet bond formed between a girl and a man who had chosen to act with kindness. Over the following days, Thomas helped the camp in small ways, fixing fences, guiding hunters, and sharing knowledge of the land he had gained from years of experience. He never demanded recognition or reward. Each act was deliberate, quiet, and aimed solely at helping others. Apache watched him closely, learning not just from his actions, but also from the humility and patience with which he approached every task. In the evenings, she would sit by the fire, holding the piece of cloth, reflecting on how a single choice, lifting a rock instead of leaving her behind, had changed her life. The memory was vivid, the weight of the stone, the heat of the sun, the sound of the wind, and the calm steadiness of Thomas's hands. That memory became a guide, reminding her that courage and trust were not always loud or visible. Sometimes they were quiet, patient, and steady. As time passed, the desert around them began to feel less hostile and more like a place of lessons, resilience, and growth. Apache learned to move with care and confidence, drawing strength from both her own experience and the lessons she observed in Thomas. She began to share these lessons with other children in the camp, teaching them about patience, courage, and the importance of helping others without expectation of reward. One morning, as the sun rose over the red rocks, Apache's mother approached her. "You have changed," she said softly, "not just because of what happened, but because of what you have learned." Apache nodded. She understood the truth in her mother's words. Survival had taught her many things, but trust and compassion had left the deepest mark. The story of that day, the day she was trapped under the canyon, the day Thomas appeared, and the journey back to safety, became a story told again and again. Each retelling carried with it the lessons of courage, patience, and humanity. The story spread beyond the camp, reaching nearby settlements and even other Apache families. Everyone who heard it remembered the quiet strength of a girl who did not scream, and the man who chose to lift a stone instead of walking away. Years later, long after Apache had grown into a strong and wise woman, she would tell the story to her children. She would describe the heat of the desert, the sharp rocks, the pain and fear she had felt, and the calm determination of Thomas. She would teach them that bravery was not always about fighting. It could be about helping, trusting, and showing kindness when it was needed most. Thomas, for his part, continued to ride the desert trails. He did not stay with the camp permanently, but he returned occasionally, always careful and respectful, always ready to help when needed. He left quietly each time, not seeking praise or recognition, but carrying the satisfaction of knowing that his actions had saved a life. And Apache, she carried the memory of him and that day in her heart forever. The desert had been cruel, the world harsh, but she had learned that courage, trust, and compassion could shine even in the most difficult places. She had learned that humanity could triumph in small, quiet ways, and that even a single act of kindness could change the course of a life. The canyon, now behind her, was no longer just a place of fear and pain. It had become a symbol of resilience, hope, and the quiet power of human connection. The rocks, the sand, and the wind held the memory of her courage and the man who had helped her when she had no one else. As the sun set over the desert horizon, casting long shadows across the red rocks, Apache looked toward the distant ridges. She knew that life would continue to test her, as it tested everyone in the harsh desert, but she also knew that the lessons she had learned, the value of trust, the power of compassion, and the strength of quiet courage, would guide her through every challenge. And so the story ended not with battle or sorrow, but with life, hope, and the enduring reminder that even in the harshest of lands, humanity could shine.